James Alexander was a Trinidadian immigrant who helped change the face of social housing in the UK. This Afro-Caribbean visionary, humanitarian and philanthropist was the first black man to establish a housing association here in England, at a time when such an act was inconceivable by a man of colour. Do you remember when and how Trinity Housing was created?
Right. Trinity Housing was created in 1969. In his work as an insurance representative, he came across lots and lots of black people who were having difficulties finding housing, as well as experiencing serious problems with landlords who were primarily the Jewish landlords who had the homes, the houses to let out rooms, etc. But also he found out that white people were having the same problems, particularly Irish people. And so with that, he would come and say to us every night, I've just met this family and this sort of appalling living conditions they had. Again, with us living in an upper middle class white area, have our own home, privacy, that always been a Christian man and mom, that a family needs to have decent homes, to be treated with dignity and respect and so forth. And the idea came up, upon him to set up a housing association. There was already housing associations in England, but there was never a housing association established by a black man.
So James set up Trinity Housing Association on the 29th of August 1969, and by December 1969 had their first property. Trinity's purpose was to buy and own existing properties and convert them into family units for the homeless and those living in poor housing conditions. With strong loyal support and commitment from his family and like-minded friends such as Cecil John, Lawrence Noel, Ewell Williams and Betty Popkins, those who believed in his dream worked tirelessly for the cause.
We're going to form this association, but we're debating what to call it. And then Ali come up with the Trinity and he draw it on the paper. And he say, okay, we do this, and everybody pay a pound as a member.
James Christopher Andrew Alexander was born on the 25th of July 1922 in San Fernando, Trinidad. His mother Imelda and his father Joseph Alexander were affluent colonial types, and James was raised as such, to be a typical English gent.
His father was one of the top headmasters in Trinidad. He was one of those men who believed that the Negro race had to learn how to be independent, how to be strong, as well as to wipe away the slave mentality that was embedded in them. And so with that, he raised his boys, which is a lot of boys and just 2 girls, to be men, gentlemen, as well as to be extremely independent.
By 1953, James had developed into an ambitious businessman who, with his multi-talented wife, Beryl, and the support of their older children, ran multiple businesses, trucks, poultry farms, and retail shops. James also managed a successful insurance agency for colonial life.
They were very well-to-do, so they would have lots of dinner parties and invite all influential people. They were a really lovely couple together.
I remember the Prime Minister, Eric Williams, coming to tea at the house. So he was well-to-do, he was well-known, and, he was way up there in the society.
James and Beryl, with their 2 children and 3 young relatives, set sail for England, the motherland, and disembarked the SS Queen Elizabeth at Southampton Dock on the 5th of December 1963. Would you describe yourself as first-generation Windrush immigrants?
No, because when my parents came here, it was an independent choice for my dad to bring us, my mom, dad, and the children over from Trinidad to England. England was looked upon as the mother country. My parents decided that, again, because my mom's brother, Uncle Gus, was living in England for many years, and her eldest brother, Uncle Laz. And so she thought she, again, wanted to be near to her family. Coming to a country where we can settle quite easily. They can teach you about the English way of life.
Within 2 years, James established himself by purchasing a house at 3 Elmstead Road, Seven Kings.
Uncle and Auntie came to this country. He came over with his family, stayed with my mum and dad for a couple of years. Within 2 years, Uncle had bought himself a house in Seven Kings.
So by 1965, the family settled in Ilford, Essex. They quickly put down roots and made England their home. For their children, life in England was very different than the one they left behind in Trinidad.
It was grey and it was cold. It was dismal. It was not very nice. And I could remember we cried for weeks that we wanted to go back. We wanted to go back.
What school did you go to?
We went to Cannon Palmer. Well, because we were the only black family down our road, and I think we were only one of the black families in Ilford at the time. So we did have a lot of prejudice. I mean, we did have a lot of bullying. We'd go to a friend's house and, you know, their mother would say, oh no, don't bring that black child into my home. You know, I mean, it was difficult, you know, and I think our parents knew that and they really helped us to get through that part of our lives. So, you know, if we came home and, you know, we had a bad day, my mum would always be there with some nice, good West Indian food. And it will be, don't worry, darling, things are going to change. They will change. You know, she'd always say that life will never always be like this. So, you know, they gave us the... They always sort of like believed that things will be much better for us.
Despite being faced with all manner of adversity, James and Beryl both worked tirelessly doing jobs they were required to do as Negroes in England, working in hospitals. James worked at King George Hospital as a theatre technician for a short time. But it was his work as an insurance salesman where he witnessed many families living in extremely poor housing conditions.
His first car. But because to try to get customers as a black man, you wouldn't go to the white people. So you had to go to black areas to educate them about making sure they have life insurance to protect themselves and their family, etc. So you go to places like Birmingham, Bristol. It meant a lot of walking. And again, if you're going to feed your family, my dad looked after the family first. So when he needed a pair of shoes, I'll never forget the time, he'd come home very late. Sometimes he would spend the whole week in Birmingham or in Manchester and such. And one day, whilst we were waiting for him to come home, myself and Mum sitting and having a chat and laugh in the kitchen. When he came in, he took out this cardboard box and he took his shoes off and he cut his shoes around the cardboard box. And when he turned it over, literally there was holes on. And I said, Dad, why are you doing that? He said, well, it's cold and I can't afford to buy a pair of shoes now because you kids need this, need that, and that. And every week he will cut out this cardboard and put it in the shoes. And that's where...
What a humbling story.
That's where you really start to respect the fact of what your parents have to go through for you.
So it wasn't surprising that James was inspired to act and help those who needed his help.
And in Birmingham, he saw how black families were living in one room with a paraffin heater and children. He decided that, you know, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something that he can do. And so he decided to start the Housing Association.
The difficulty of having to go to the government to discuss and find out how to set up a housing association and so forth. That took a lot of courage because the fact that they look upon him as, you know, this black man who wants to do so, but that was charismatic.
So during this time, Redbridge Local Authority had many boarded up and derelict homes called ghost houses that came about by a planned redevelopment of the town centre. Houses that were put under an execution order in anticipation of ministry approval that never came.
But their development means the demolition of over 900 good houses to provide council office space and 5 multi-storey car parks. So grandiose is the scheme that planning permission has not yet been granted, and there is no guarantee that the council can afford to complete or even start the project. Although 2,000 complaints have been lodged, houses are already being left empty in preparation for the 1978 demolition. These are houses that could mean homes for those in the hostels and slums of the East End.
Squatting in these empty homes was also widespread. So to prevent the squatters takeover movement, the council would send workmen on a sledgehammer spree to do considerable damage to them, making them unsafe and uninhabitable. Angry confrontations between squatters, councillors and the police was not uncommon. But when the East London squatters movement highlighted the situation whereby good housing was standing empty as the sad queue on the council's housing list grew. As a result, when the situation was exposed and made public, Anthony Greenwood, a Labour Minister for Housing, backed the idea that homes awaiting demolition should be used for temporary housing. In a circular put out in 1969, he proposed that demolition housing should be offered to housing associations who specialised in utilising such properties. At this point, Trinity and the Homemakers were all systems go, and by 1970 they had taken control of 35 houses and produced 62 units of accommodation in the borough of Redbridge. By 1971, they housed 201 families. The majority of these tenants were single mothers, young married couples, and large families. Working in close partnership with the GLC in the constructive use of short-life properties, Redbridge Council, who provided the loans to repair the houses, which included accepting nominations from their housing waiting list, and Shelter, who offered financial support to tenants in return for more emphasis on family care.
And so his criteria was regardless of race, colour or creed, as long as you're in poor housing. And he looked for the most deprived, the difficulties. The council or government was not interested in single parents, who were the worst deprived ones, single men, single families and so forth. He was just interested in poverty as well as poor housing. And it was tough, it was difficult. He had, they had all the meetings, etc. It was exciting in the sense of seeing whether or not he would be able to achieve it.
These housing associations were the true philanthropists of the day, fighting the government for the needs of the poor. James and his Homemakers expanded at a fantastic rate and became a highly respected, formidable force. Trinity found premises at 73 Ilford Lane, and their work was woven into the fabric of those they worked with and those they helped.
I think most of us were living in one-bedroom flats, etc., when we first came to this country in the early 60s, 50s and 60s. So I don't think anybody was in their mind saw themselves actually owning houses and things. And so Pops came and encouraged people and showed them that they can do that. And that's why there was a great big exodus from North London to Ilford and to East London, because even I moved over to East London.
The Homemakers continued their work, creating homes for the homeless, like the renovation work at 23 Audrey Road. A ghost house, demolished by the council in 1969. The house was completely refurbished and officially opened by Councillor Julia Roberts in October 1971.
Again, through the association, Mum found out that a lot of the single parents didn't have enough money to even feed their families.
It was the very first Caribbean West Indian food shop actually in Ilford on Ilford Lane. She used to give people a lot of charity. Oh, you can pay me when you can.
Trinity would also hold an annual dinner and dance, held at the Room at the Top in Harrison Gibson's, and was a yearly event that everyone looked forward to, a time to celebrate their achievements and show their gratitude to their employees, contractors, tenants and stakeholders.
We had a dinner and dance up at Tiffany's on the top of Harrison and Gibson. That was very moving. They had a presentation as well. which I was on the receiving end, and I got myself the best D&Z officer. I was presented with a fountain pen.
How did Trinity Housing come to its demise? What happened?
Right, in the late 1970s, the government decided that there was too many housing associations, and they decided they want to amalgamate a few to form one large organization. So Trinity was amalgamated with two other housing associations.
Between 1969 and 1981, James and his homemakers, through Trinity Housing Association, went on to house over 1,000 families in Redbridge and the surrounding boroughs, as well as assisting countless others in purchasing their own homes. So by 1983, Trinity closed its doors and was merged to create East London Housing, formerly known as East Thames Group.
And to this day, I meet a few old tenants who, as soon as they see me, they say, "Thank God for your mom and dad that we were able to survive."
James was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2002. This was his final race, championing this cause, particularly amongst black males. He lost his battle with prostate cancer on the 5th of August 2005, closing the chapter of this rare, kind and dynamic man. James's legacy goes far beyond what you've heard today, from his Second World War achievements to standing for local elections and further work championing causes. He also set up the St Mauritius residential home for ethnic minorities in South East London.
When I look back now of what he has done, I look upon him as one of my main heroes. Because at that time it would have been so much more difficult, simply because you are a black person and you're not expected to achieve what you've achieved. All his thoughts and mom's thoughts was on helping people to live a better life. It was nothing to do with themselves. They didn't even care about getting paid, as long as they see a smiling face. Whenever they house someone from poor housing and see the joy, they were so happy. I mean, Mom particularly, she will be having a party just to house a family.
Old man Alexander really, for what he did for black people and what he did in Redbridge and Ilford, I think, he should be recognized, and at least something, memory of him should be around for other people to follow.
When you think in those days what people didn't have and what he was able to give to people, I think he did a great job. And for a black man in that time and in our community, for what he's achieved, I think it's amazing, amazing. I don't know how he did it, but somehow it came about that he rehoused over thousands of people, and even up to now, people are still grateful for that.
James became known as Dad because he gave the true meaning to the word father, meeting the needs and providing for everyone he encountered. He challenged the canon in terms of the misled stereotyping and perceptions of black masculinity and the notion that all black men are lazy and unambitious. For this reason, this kind and charismatic man is not just my hero. He was simply my dad.